speaker.
Oh, right. I thought it came on automatically. No. Right.
Sorry.
Right. Good morning. Okay. Welcome to the Audit Committee of Northumberland County Council. We have 5 apologies, but we are still quorate. So the apologies are from Councillor Towns, Councillor Sesford, Councillor Dale, Councillor Jackson, and also one of the independent members, Dr. Stuart Green. But it's good to see the other independent member, Mr. Jim Harrah, over there. Right. We move to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 25th of September. And I'm not proposing to go through it page by page. I'm assuming we've all read it. If there are any matters of correction on the minutes, then now is the time. Otherwise, I will ask for council, for the committee to approve and agree them. Agreed?
No, agreed.
Thank you. Any interest to disclose from any members? There's quite a detailed list of what you should disclose, but right. Trevor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just that I'm Chair of Advance and it's on the last item on the agenda in pink, but I will be staying.
Yep.
Keep us core.
And you're very welcome.
Could I just ask a question? I am now, part of the shadow portfolio holder for Advance, which will be my shadow portfolio holder's role. And I don't know if I need to declare an interest today and remove myself today with being pink papers, or is that okay? I just wanted a clarification just on record, so I'm not breaching any rules.
No,
thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay. Right. So we move to the substantive items on the agenda, leading with the various reports from the Head of Internal Audit and Risk Management. Mr. MacDonald, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report is a report which we bring to committee each November, and it's just the interim or mid-year statement on the internal audit plan for 24-25. This committee will remember we brought the plan to you in March for approval. And this is just an update to you as the committee, as the position statement at the mid-year point. Some of the information on pages 22 and 23 of the papers just give that summary information of progress towards the plan during the year to date. And then the table, which is on page 27 onwards, just takes the plan that was agreed in March and gives a current position statement on that plan for you. It is to be noted that there are changes to that plan, which is a normal part of the internal auditing during a year, where we have to react to emerging risks and changing priorities during the year. But hopefully all of that is itemised in the table, where we're showing which work is proposing to change and where. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay. Questions? I'll go with Mr. Jim first. And
Thanks,
then
Chair.
Councillor.
It's just a quick clarification because I didn't really understand it. One of the tables about the average score for client feedback received. I appreciate the target's lower than 2 and the actual is 1.16, but I don't. What does it mean exactly? How have you come about that score?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Mr. Hannah. So, at the end of every assignment that we undertake, we issue a feedback questionnaire to clients, and we have a range of questions on those questionnaires, and they're all structured in a way which asks for a response which is a multi-choice, one of 4 answers. So they range from very satisfied, satisfied, not satisfied, or very unsatisfied, and we assign a score of 1, 2, 3, 4 to each of those answers. So if we got top marks in every question, the average would be 1.0. If we got the worst answer in every question, the average would be 4.0. So they are the best and worst possible scores. So 1.0 is the best possible score that we could achieve. And as we saw, we achieved 1.17 last year, and the year to date we're at 1.16. So does that help explain that a little bit better?
The lower the score, the better.
Correct, but the lowest it can possibly be is 1.0.
Right, I get that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. And it's always helpful to have that clarification on those sorts of things, because sometimes people just read these reports and think, yes, 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 but actually articulating what that means is helpful. So thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. The progress in the table on 4.5 at the halfway point is less than 50%, which I'm sure is perfectly normal and not unexpected. But that was 2 months ago. How have sort of things progressed since then?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it is a normal point in the air. So, and again, at the table at the top of page 23, where we're looking at the number of days achieved, at 43% is lower than perhaps the 50% you would expect to see. But because of the way we profile, for example, so people tend to take the vast majority of their annual leave during the summer months. So you tend to see more leave in the first half of the year than the second half of the year. So you don't always get a 50-50 split, as you say, Councillor Oliver. So at that midpoint, we were fairly comfortable with where that was. It's something that we continue to monitor as we go. Some of the changes that we've then in the restated plan are kind of reflecting what we've seen in the first half of the year and what we sort of knew which was coming for the second half of the year. So work is progressing. It's something that we do keep under review, and we will come back to you in January at the end of quarter three position as well. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? I had one, which was to do with the reprogramming. So a general question, first of all, are we confident that if we're reprogramming forward, sometimes into next year, we're doing that on a risk-based assessment of what needs to be done sooner rather than later, and we're not just pushing it all forward. And specifically, the capital projects work, the revisiting of that. So if you can give us that general assurance and give us a specific on that one. Jan, you may want to come in because capital projects are yours. Right.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In short, the answer to your first question is yes. So there's no suggestion of us being put off by clients or service areas or anything like that. It's something that is a continual assessment process, and where we have emerging pieces of work coming in, we have to do that assessment about, is this a higher risk of something on the plan? And yes, things on the plan are still a risk, but they are not an imminent risk, so we can then, it's almost like a rolling 12-month assessment of, we'll do it within the next 12 months. So yes, that takes place. With regards to capital, forgive me because I'm just going to find the, if that was reprogrammed to next year. So in terms of capital, we have undertaken a piece of work on capital programme management, which I think is featured in a later agenda item as well. It's in the key outcomes report. And from memory, that was issued in August. So in terms of making the optimum time for those pieces of work, it would make sense to give some time for some of the findings from the work that we've just finished to take effect and embed, and then we will look at that next year.
Right.
Rather than look at it again straight away when we haven't let sufficient time pass.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Jan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or is that?
Not really, Chair, other than to say capital programme management isn't my sole responsibility. Just put that on record. I merely make sure we have the money to pay for it.
Right. Good. Okay. Well, that's important. Okay. Right, so members, we're being asked to, in this case, agree the recommendations. So we don't need to take a vote on this, do we? Sorry? A proposer and a seconder. So I need a Councillor Oliver, Councillor Grimshaw seconding. Thank you. We're agreeing. We're being asked to agree the recommendations. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now, 4B is where Mr. MacDonald gives us some of the findings from the audits that he's done, or his team have done. So, Kevin, over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is almost the flip side of the previous report in terms of we talk about what we've done, and this is more about the so what element. So you're quite correct, Chair. This is a report covering the period of the last 6 months between April and October of this year, and just summarises the pieces of work that we finalised to give you in the normal format, the committee an overview of those the findings and the outcomes from that work. So the table, which starts on page 43 in the papers, as you say, it's sort of a one-side most summary of the work that was undertaken, the assurance opinion level, an indication of the issues or the recommendations that were made, any good practice that was highlighted, and then what's happened since. In a number of cases, we've been able to demonstrate that recommendations that were made and agreed have been implemented. There are some that are in the process of being implemented, and there are some where the target date for implementation hasn't yet been reached. But that's something that we keep a wider view on, so that they don't get missed. But again, Chair, I'll not say too much more, but happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions on the findings from the audits? Jim?
Are we referring to the appendix as well? Yeah, it was just something in the appendix which I know everybody here will know the answer to, but I don't. Oracle Fusion, what is it? And is the issue there's not an end of date recorded for the fixed term contract, or is it because it's not recorded in Oracle Fusion? That's page 47, page 9 on the appendix. I'm assuming it's some kind of HR package or something like that. I wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah. Yes, Chair. Yes, in short, yes. So Oracle Fusion is the package, the software package that we use in terms of our processing and all the sort of the payroll mechanics system in the background. So there was one, out of a sample of 337, there was one that didn't have the date recorded in the system. So that's now since been rectified. It was just the...
It was because it wasn't recorded in the system, or was it because there was no end date given? That's what really what I'm...
It's the first, so it just hadn't been entered into the system.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Chair. Kevin, I'm probably asking the wrong question in the wrong place, but it's something members always bring up with great regularity, and that's Section 106 monies on page 7. And when I read that report, firstly, it's over 4 years since an audit was done on Section 106, which seems a long time, with something like £17 million in the balances, if my memory serves me right. And I read the report, it says reasonable and everything, in my words, it's hunky-dory, where members feel as if it's far from hunky-dory when they would like to get their hands on Section 106 money and see it being spent. So I see it as a risk that it just lies in the bank and is quite ineffective. And tallied with that is the viability question. The Section 106, I realise working with Rob Murphy is very difficult to achieve. I know the Section 106 officer, Heather, does a fantastic job. Her whole team does. But then you find a house, for example, I can speak personally. Mine was valued at 160,000, but when I went to buy it, it was 229,000. Multiply that by 58 on a small development, it's a lot of money. And that becomes a risk that the council isn't getting the full Section 106 contributions it should be getting, which can have a major effect on infrastructures such as the development of Cooper Road. I say that because Jeff's here. Sorry. But you get where I'm coming from. Probably the wrong question in the wrong place. I apologise. But I just feel as if somebody can shake them up, it's Audit who can. So that's why I raise it.
Can you provide any?
To some extent, Chair. Thank you for your view of Audit. That's much appreciated. Though it probably, I think you're right, it is maybe asking the wrong person the question. I think the bits that I can come back to you on is, you're right, it is sort of nearly 4 years since we did the last review. But we know, again, coming back to what we in the previous report, it was around, there was a great deal of work going on in the service area. There was a lot of legislative changes which had to be taken account of. So it was letting that happen. And then it was the optimum time for us to go in and do that revised assurance work, which we did. Obviously, all I can report on is what we found and the evidence we found as part of the work. We did see there'd been a huge improvement since the previous report in October 2020. It would probably then be inappropriate for me to comment any further on some of those specific matters you raised, Councillor Wallace, but happy to note them and maybe sort of take those away and mention them to you know, in the appropriate forums. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor, this is on Section 106 as well.
It is.
Yeah,
I sit on the committee that reviews the applications, and although I can't speak to securing Section 106, a lot of it's very historical and some of it's been sitting there for many years, but all of the money available is on the council's website, and from time to time, I think Heather writes to the town and parish councils who in those areas to remind them that the money is there and encourage them to encourage sports groups or community groups or whatever in their localities to apply for it and get it spent. So they are very mindful of the fact that it's there to be spent, and they do encourage people to do that.
Okay. And Section 106 is close to councillors' hearts, so it's a fair question. Right. Okay. I just had a quick question. Jim, you go first.
It's a really quick question. It's more of interest for me. I noticed about the tendering the contracts for schools, if they don't get quotes over 10,000, right? So if they pay for something, say 9.5, that they don't have to do it. They don't have to get 3 quotes, is it? I was just curious about that, because I can't get 3 quotes to fit some windows in my house, you know what I mean? I just wondered if that was becoming a problem for schools. So it's not an awful lot of money now, is it, when you talk about IT purchases and things?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I take your comment. Having never been a head teacher and sort of thinking about that. But they are what are required in our school scheme. I think the scheme has been reviewed fairly recently, but at the time we did the pieces of work that are in this report, that was what was required of schools at the time. I think that threshold has been lowered. If I remember. Increased. Yeah. Increased. Sorry, yes. But yes, that's what the scheme requirements are.
Okay. From me, I'm back on this capital programme, and I take on board and accept what you said earlier about not continually revisiting and giving them a chance to bed in the recommendations. I did note that the original target implementation dates for what seems to me to be some pretty sensible recommendations on risk management and project gateways, that the management are now looking for, the 31st of December, so it's not too far ahead. So are you confident that the assurances they've given you that they will implement these?
Thank you, Chair. Saying I'm confident of implementation is maybe an assurance that I can't give. What I can say is, I think this was only issued in August.
Yes.
So to then put that target dates back to December doesn't concern me, is maybe what I can say. It seems reasonable. I know as part of the work in preparing this report, I gather sort of a wider review of the arrangements in place has commenced, and then all of the recommendations will be picked up as part of that wider review, which possibly accounts for why there's a bit of a time extension on the end. So I'm not worried that they've been missed or ignored or anything like that, far from it. It's probably a bit of a wider piece of work which will take a little bit longer to do.
Yes, okay. No, that's fair enough. So do you set the target dates or do they come up with them? Because as you say, from August, if I was in receipt of these recommendations and I have them in August, I would say December is a reasonable time to have got them done. So maybe they were a bit over-enthusiastic in saying they do them before December.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, no, we do not set the target dates. So we will agree target dates with the relevant service areas, but the service areas provide the response to the recommendation and a target date for implementation.
Right.
Obviously, we will have a view as part of that discussion if it's 3 years hence, and we would say, well, that's not realistic. But no, we don't set the target dates. And I possibly can't comment on the detail of these, but I guess we have had in the past where sometimes target dates have been set a little bit optimistically, and then the work starts and it takes a little bit longer. Whether that's happened in this case, I probably couldn't comment without looking at the detail. But as I say, even having that target date extended to the end of December feels reasonable to me.
Yes,
yeah.
it does.
May I make a comment?
Yeah. Yes, do come in.
Thank you. Some of these recommendations are things which can only be implemented as part of the current budget setting process.
Right.
So if I look at the recommendation to consistently record decisions relating to capital projects as part of the annual budget setting process, we are going through that budget setting process now. It will not come to its end until Council approves the budget in February of next year. So, notwithstanding that a target date, the 31st of December, has been agreed, it's my view that some of these things will not be fully implemented and embedded at that date. What I think we can reasonably expect, however, is that it will have been agreed how we're going to do it, and that will have been documented.
Right.
So, when we talk about consistently recording decisions, what's the mechanism for doing that? Do we need a template? Who's responsible for that, etc. There are 17 recommendations here. Some of them I think are pretty easy to and quick to implement. Others will require a bit more thought. And and for me, it's about not just documenting a process, but actually then putting that policy or those procedures into effect. So
That's
I hope that perhaps
a
gives a bit more context to your question.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And as you say, I mean, it's not just about ticking a box. It's about demonstrating that the recommendation has been thought about and embedded. And if that takes slightly longer, then that's acceptable. Okay. Thank you. Right. If there are no further questions on that one or comments, again, we're being asked to agree the recommendations, so I need a proposer and a seconder. So Councillor Grimshaw proposing, Councillor Oliver seconding. We're agreeing them. Agreed. Thank you. Right. We now come on to agenda item 5, which is the mid-year report on Treasury Management. And Jan, I think this is for you.
It is, Chair. So this is the regular half-yearly report I bring to the committee to give you assurance that all of our treasury management activity has been undertaken in accordance with the limits and the policies set out in the treasury management policy statement, which is agreed by council every year. So the report confirms that that is the case for the first 6 months of the year. I'm very mindful that it's quite a dry report, and to make things slightly more interesting, Chair, I thought the committee might want to hear some thoughts on what's happened subsequent to the 30th of September, because of course we've had two really significant events since then, one being the Chancellor's autumn budget statement and the other being the result of the US election, both of which will have a really significant impact on sort of the world and therefore the UK economy, and will impact therefore on our treasury management strategy and activities going forwards. So a couple of things to note. So the first thing is that the Bank of England cut the base rate from 5% to 4.75%. At their meeting, I think it was on the 7th of November. Lots of speculation about what's going to happen to interest rates. I think we are still on a downward trend, but the issue is about how fast interest rates come down. And the other thing that plays into that, of course, is what's happening with inflation. It had fallen to 1.7% and then bounced back up to 2.3%. That was the latest monthly figure, and that's because of the increase in the energy cap kicking in from October predominantly. Some other factors feeding into that, but that was the big one. And of course, interest rates and inflation, are very closely linked. Interestingly enough, some economists are forecasting that interest rates will actually come down faster than expected, and that the market is not really pricing that in. So I think the consensus is that by this time next year, interest rates will have come down to 3.75, so 1% lower than they currently are. Goldman Sachs are forecasting that will actually be 2.75%, which I think is interesting. It remains to be seen whether they're right or not. But I think that will be influenced by what's happening more broadly in terms of the economy and the world economy, because our interest rates tend to follow what's happening in the US predominantly and the central bank in Europe. So a couple of things I think to say on that. First of all, in terms of the October budget, there was, as expected, an increase of 0.15 in the gilt yield. So that's what the government has to pay for its borrowing. But we haven't seen a significant effect on interest rates. I think we'll have to wait and see what happens. I think in terms of growth as well, and see how that plays out. But the outcome of the US election, I think, will have a significant impact, and I think will have significant impact in two ways. First of all, if, as he has announced, Trump intends to introduce significant trade tariffs, that would have a significant impact in terms of a bit of a slowdown in economic activity outside of the US. That's one reading of it. The other reading, of course, is that Trump is a deal maker. He doesn't actually intend to levy these massive tariffs. He's using it as a lever or a bargaining chip to get what he really wants, which is, in terms of Mexico, he wants them to take Mexican government to take action to stem the flow of migrants, for example. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But I think the other thing that's is plausible is that he will seek to do a deal to bring the Ukrainian war to an early end. Ukraine might not be very happy about the terms on which that's done, but I think it's clearly that is the intention, and that could help to ease, you know, some of the pressures that we're seeing around some of those inflation sort of drivers around energy in particular. So you know, it's difficult to know exactly how these things are going to play out, but there's lots of different issues for us to think about in terms of what does that potentially mean for our treasury management strategy going forwards. But in the meantime, the fact that interest rates and borrowing costs are coming down is very good news.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that world view tour of the horizon. Fascinating, right? Yes. Councillor Oliver.
Very brave to be second-guessing what President Trump might be doing. But, the thing that sprung out to me in this report was in paragraph 10.4, which is the maturities next year, 176 million maturing in 1 year, which presumably is fairly unusual. And obviously, on the basis of what you've just said, I guess a lot of that will be refinanced. So we're probably hoping that interest rates will come down to 2.75. And but is that a position that you're sort of comfortable with? Or I mean, I know there's nothing you can do about it; it has to be dealt with. But could you just comment on that?
Yes, that was part of the strategy that we agreed, because interest rates were at their peak, and were expected to come down quite rapidly. We would borrow short and look to refinance. So I think that's just a question of timing, and we can continue to borrow short and replace those on a short-term basis if we need to. It's about waiting for the right moment.
Okay. Yep. Jan, just sort of following up on that. I mean, this is para 10.3 again on page 63. So my understanding is that the current policy of using cash will come to an end, and we will need to borrow more going forward. And quite a bit of that is based on the need for borrowing for capital programs in the next 3 or 4 years. So is that something that's a risk that we're comfortable with, we're managing, mitigating, in your opinion?
So this is the reason why we have limits on the amount of borrowing to ensure that it remains sustainable, and we also have treasury management indicators that are agreed by council in terms of the proportion of our net revenue budget that is committed for debt management expenses, so servicing that debt. You know, the sustainability of the capital programme is something that you know, we need to be mindful of. We have had a really huge capital programme for many years compared to most councils. A lot of that has been driven by the fact that we've been very successful in securing external funding. So if you think, you know, there's a massive amount of Borderlands funding, for example, levelling up deals, you know, town deals, etc. And the Northumberland line, you know, hundreds of millions of pounds in sort of government grants coming through the capital programme. But we have also, you know, maintained a higher level of investment, you know, council-funded investment through the capital programme than most other councils in recent years. And yes, at some point, you know, we're going to have to confront that. What we are trying to do, though, Chair, as part of this year's budget process, this was a commitment that I gave last year, was that we would bring forward a 10-year capital programme. So when the budget comes forward in February, you will see the usual level of detail for the first 3 years. And thereafter, you will see indicative numbers, you know, over the remainder of the 10 years, because we do need to take those capital investment decisions on a longer term basis. It's not you know, it's not the same as revenue, where you know you're essentially you're making relatively short term decisions. With capital, you know, it's appropriate to take that longer term view and make sure that within that 10-year capital programme that you're reflecting the need to maintain the existing asset base. It's not just about building new things, or you know, it's about recognising that we have to periodically replace all of our transport fleet, for example, our fire engines, our refuse trucks, etc., that we need to invest in our IT infrastructure, desktop refresh, you know, because laptops and servers and things like that don't last forever. So it's about making sure all of that's properly planned, and obviously all of our property sort of maintenance as well. So, you know, our existing buildings, you know, are not crumbling. And so I think there will be a rebalancing of the capital programme. But you're right, there is a finite limit to the amount that we can borrow without placing too much strain on the revenue budget.
Right. Okay. And as you say, in February, February is the new budget.
Yes, we bring forward the revenue and the capital budget at the same time for approval. Yes.
Okay. Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you. It isn't a question, it's a comment. I'm just delighted that the Treasury Management and all the team that deals with these is in safe hands, because they do a tremendous amount of work and looking after our finances. So it's commendable the way that you control it, and it's, you know, and it's wonderful to hear, you know, that we are in a good, well, I know of the world next, and it's very interesting to find out, because we're all interested in things that's happened, but, you know, the finances are looked after well, and that's highly commendable. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think we'd endorse that with all. Yeah, there's a lot of money, and it needs to be looked after well. And on the basis of this report, it is being looked after well. Okay, thank you. Right. Jeff.
Last February, we passed a 2-year budget. So I'm not really certain why you're talking about not being able to tell us something that we decided last year we were going to do. Does that make sense? We passed a 2-year budget last year. So when we get to February 2025, that's the second year of the budget. So if we've already set it, why are we talking about you not being able to tell us stuff now? And the other thing you could do while you're replying to that is just remind us how much of the revenue account is being spent, percentage-wise, how much of the revenue account is being spent on repaying loans.
Can you help?
Okay. So we set a 2-year revenue budget. I'm talking about capital programme. So the capital programme will be rolled forward in February in the normal way. So there will be a further year of detail which is added, and then we will also give an indicative view of what the capital investment requirements will be in years 4 to 10. So that's additional information. Although, as far as the revenue budget is concerned, although we did set out the parameters of the 25-6 budget. We didn't actually technically set the 25-6 budget. We can't do that. We have to do that. Only council can do that, and it has to be done again in February. And of course, the world has moved on. So, you know, although we had, it had been the intention that the broad, you know, sort of shape and parameters of the budget would have been agreed, and we would only be making changes at the margin, we do nevertheless need to sort of reflect what's happened in the intervening 12 months. And quite a lot's happened in the intervening 12 months. I don't know exactly at this point in time what the percentage is, but I think the upper limit that we specified in the Treasury Management Policy was 12.5%, and I know we're below that. But I can dig that information. I can dig that information out and just, you know, Andrea can circulate it.
Sorry, John,
11%. Okay. Well, we're below that.
well, the maximum you said was 12 and a bit, so just, you know.
Yeah.
I realise I should be keeping all of these darts for another forum, but I just couldn't resist the opportunity to ask you about having set the. Is there any point, from an audit point of view, in setting a 2-year budget when you're actually going to change everything when you get to the second year? I think is kind of, because you've changed a lot. I mean, basically what we said last February was the council tax is going to go the maximum allowed under the law. So basically all we did was we set the council tax rate for 2 years, but we didn't set the budget.
Right. I mean, well, I was going to say, at the risk of getting between, you know, I mean, my assessment will be that second year, if it changed significantly, then people would need to demonstrate and account for why there were those changes. But as Jan has said, I mean, quite a lot happened in the last 12 months. But I wouldn't want to get in the way of usual business. Is there anything else you want to help on this one? No. Right. Right.
We're straying into political territory.
We're going to move on. We are invited to do two things: to receive the report and note the performance, and the performance of the Treasury management function is a robust one, and the parameters that we're not supposed to exceed, clearly people are monitoring those very carefully. So we're asked to receive the report and note the performance, and we're secondly asked to present the report to County Council. I'm not sure how does that happen, because in terms of presenting the report, presumably we don't verbally present it.
Does it not just get added to the agenda?
It'll get added to the
Right.
agenda.
And the council will ask to note it?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
If Councillor Dale was here, she would have questions about that, but she's not. So. Yeah. Right. Okay. So can I have again a proposer and a seconder for those to note this report and present it? Right. Councillor Oliver proposed. Jeff, you seconded. Are we in agreement? We are. Thank you. Good. Right. Now we move to external audit. And Mark, we're doing two things here. I mean, obviously, I'll hand over to you, but we're looking at the final version of the annual report. But I don't expect, and I don't think we need to spend significant amounts of time looking at the period 2021 to 2023, because we went through that at the September meeting. Is that correct? But more importantly, you're going to give us the audit strategy for the year ending 31st of March 2024. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You're quite right reminding the committee that we considered the circulated paper of our annual auditor's report. It was a composite report covering multiple years, and we went through that in during the September meeting. So we brought this final version to committee as a formality so that you can see the final version of that report. So unless there are any further comments or questions, I'm happy to move on from that and close. But I'll pause there just in case there are any follow-up issues.
Okay. So we're noting that. Thank you.
Item 6B is our audit strategy memorandum for 23-24. Members will appreciate that the pace and the frequency of audits has picked up recently, and we're aiming to get up to date by completing our audit work on the most recent financial year before the new backstop date takes effect in February. So the risks that feature in the audit strategy memorandum are consistent with the previous years, so there are no new issues or concerns that we have identified as part of our risk assessment procedures that we're bringing to your attention. Work on our audit of the financial statement and also on our updated knowledge of the value for money arrangements that the County Council has got has proceeded, and this plan's brought to you for your consideration and awareness. We are, of course, happy to take into account any questions or comments that members might have on the risk assessment work that we've done or on the risks that we've identified that are presenting to our work on both the opinion on the financial statements and also on the value for money part of our work. I'll pause there and see if there are any questions or comments, Chair.
Jim, you have a question.
Yeah, I just, on one of the pages it had about the fees going over the years, and I noticed that it's probably a simple explanation that the fees were more or less the same year after year until this year. It was gone up to 475,000, so like trebled kind of from the previous year. Is there any particular reason why? I'm looking at page 28 of the appendix, page 142. It was 190, 170, 170, 178, then 475,000. Just seemed a big difference from the other years.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The fees that are in the annual auditors report, it's on page 103 of the published agenda pack. I think that's the page you're referring to, if I've got that right. Yeah. They reflect the work done by the audit teams in carrying out their responsibilities, and the years in question did involve some unusual and deeper audit procedures in response to the risks that my predecessor identified, and the fee calculation is based on a total value and an apportionment across the years that are featuring in that page that sets out our fees. It's 33 of our report and 103 of the published agenda pack. So we're not in the business of trying to get more money than is due to us in carrying out our work. We just cover our costs, and during the years in question there were additional unanticipated costs because of the risks that were presenting to the audit teams. So that's why the fees are different.
Basically, there's a lot more work.
More work,
to do. Yeah,
more risks equals
person,
more work.
You know,
that's right.
a lot more work to do. Okay.
Councillor Oliver, do you want to come in on this?
Just to follow up on that, because the what you've just said reflects the difference between the scale fee and the total because of the additional work. But I think the point being made is that the scale fee, which I appreciate, I don't think is something you set, is it? It's a national thing. But a question is, why has that gone up from 178,000 to 475,000? That is a big leap.
It is.
Thank you, Chair. You're quite right. The scale fee is set by a third-party body, Public Sector Audit Appointments, and the fee increases for you and all of the other local authorities involved in their contract arrangement increased significantly following the most recent tender exercise, and I cannot really take questions about the scale fee and the underpinning reasons, because that's a decision that was made by PSAA, which is a public body, and they've got their statutory remit to set fees for local authority entities, but there is a significant increase. It's one that's faced by all local government bodies that feature as part of that contract, Chair.
Yep. I'm not trying to throw you a lifeline here. There's the international CIPFA audit changes that are coming in. That's nothing to do with this. Right. Yeah.
If I may, Chair, I mean, I think there's a number of different factors that have all converged, you know, resulting in that really is a massive hike in audit, external audit fees. Some of that is to do with enhanced oversight and regulation from the Financial Reporting Council and the additional requirements that's placed on external auditors. Some of it is to do with you know, with accounting standards, international standards, various other standards, etc. And some of it is just to do with the state of the external audit market, yes, and particularly post-COVID, you know, there was a massive audit overhang, and it's clear that there wasn't sufficient capacity in the market to deal with that, and that's pushed up costs as well. So I think you know, all of those issues have come home to roost in the recent retendering exercise. But the scope of audit, you know, is a significant factor in that as well, and those expectations. There are discussions going on nationally about whether, you know, with a new government, about whether there is scope for simplifying and streamlining, you know, some of this. And CIPFA and other bodies are involved in those discussions. But until, you know, the requirements and the scope of audit work changes, or the whole system is simplified, I'm afraid, you know, we're stuck in a position where we're going to be spending at least £500,000 every year on external audit fees. And then, of course, there are other things, grant claims and, you know, other bits and pieces on top of that. So it will be over £500,000 in total. And I think if you know, in the context of all the pressures on public finances, the question that's being asked is that an appropriate use of public money? And, you know, we have to wait for that debate to play out. But I think we're all hopeful that, you know, that some form of simplification will be agreed at some point, because we do spend, and it's not just you know, the amount of effort that goes in from the external auditors, but also the internal teams, you know, who are working pretty much year round on some of these issues now, whereas it used to be a, you know, sort of a short 2 to 3 month window where we did all the accounts work. Now, you know, it's a full-time job, you know, 12 months of the year. So it's a huge overhead.
Yes. Right. I think we've exhausted the discussion on that one. But it's right that we should recognise the amount of money that we're committing to that external audit work. Are there any other questions on Mark's report and the strategy going forward? Mark, final question from me. I mean, I don't want to, you know, far be it from me to reopen any issues, but the recommendation that you've and your predecessor have made, you know, over the years in terms of, I'm looking at page 14, page 15 of your memorandum, and the recommendation to address the weaknesses that were identified in previous years is pretty much repeated verbatim. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, so give me some rope, but it basically says the council should continue to ensure that the improvements made in its arrangements, you know, are continued. So it continues on that journey of improvement. And I'm assuming that underneath that the discussions you're having with the council in terms of what does that journey look like and what are the milestones you're looking for is ongoing. Is that fair?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's quite correct. In essence, the reference to the recommendation in the Audit Strategy Memorandum is to, again, it's part of our risk assessment procedure. So where a previous recommendation has been made, it's understandable and expected that we would take that into account in planning the procedures for the value for money arrangements work that we need to do in the next year. So that's why that's planted there. And in terms of following up the progress that the County Council has made in response to the recommendation and the underlying report and the findings of the previous agencies and audit, we will take that into account and reflect on those in the annual audits report for the 23-24 financial year, Chair. So you're quite right. Progress based on milestones and expectations is a key part of our considerations.
Okay. Right. If there are no further questions, we're simply being asked to note this report. Yes. So we're noting it. Thank you, Mark and Diane. And we're moving to the final item in this part of the meeting, which is the action log. And just making sure that we're doing the things that we committed to do. And I see the action log as no more than that. It's an aide memoir to remind us of the things that we said we were going to do. So what I'm going to invite committee members to do is, are there any points that they would like to raise? Because what I'm seeing is some sensible responses. So, for example, number 2 about developing the skills of members. We agreed to keep this action open until training has been completed, and some of us were able to take part in quite a useful and enlightening discussion about what the council's doing in terms of anti-fraud activity, and that took place online last week. It was very, very well presented by Amy, and we're going to do a second one of those on risk early in the new year, Kevin. So we're trying to develop a program there. So we'll keep that action open. On the information about Northumberland Communities Together, Councillor Oliver, is there anything you wanted to ask? Because it says here a notice to be circulated to all members. Are you content with that?
Yes.
Right. Excellent.
I thought that had already been done. Jill O'Neill, I thought, was doing an all-member briefing on what's happening with that. So I think that one could be closed.
Right. So it has been done, and you've got the note. Right. So we can close that one. Right. Number 3, Jan, can you help us on this one? That's work in progress. Yeah.
I can, Chair. I'm expecting to receive the first draft of local partnerships report at the end of this week.
Okay, good. And on number 4, which was the Borderlands, that's going to...
It went this week to Corporate Services and Economic Growth Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Chair.
Chair, may I comment? It was an absolute brilliant presentation. and we're given a lot of information of what's happening, you know, in the short and long term with regard to projects in various towns and parish council areas. So it was really, really informative, and we got a lot out of it. So yes, it's going very well, I think.
Good. But Councillor Oliver?
I don't want to speak for other people, but I mean, it was a really good presentation, but it was only about the PLACE programme as part of the Borderlands, which I think is 12 million of the 350 million. So there was quite a lot that wasn't covered. It wasn't me that raised it, and I don't have, but that's just worth noting.
Yes,
Pick that
if you
up,
can
Chair.
help.
So we are in discussions, when I say we, officers are in discussion with government about a reset of the Borderlands programme, because as we've reported previously, there have been some really significant challenges in delivering that programme. So I think once those discussions have come to some sort of conclusion, that would be the appropriate time perhaps to provide a broader update for members. But I think some proposals in terms of what that reset might look like are due to go to the Borderlands, to the board shortly. So.
Okay. Right. Well, let's bank that helpful offer. All the other actions are complete, and just to note for the diary that we have this additional meeting on the 26th of February, which is to receive Mark's audit opinion. Is that right? Yeah, and that's quite an important one. Okay, so we've noted the report. I don't have any urgent business that I've been made aware of. I'm just looking round if there's anything else. No. So the next scheduled meeting is Wednesday the 29th of January, but as I say, don't forget that we've got another one on Wednesday the 26th of February. So we're earning our corn. Now we're going to move to exclude the press and public. So sorry about that.